Last video I told you I went through every file the Department of War released last week, 161 of them. I walked you through the cases I found notable. The bronze ellipsoid over an American test site, the senior intelligence official chasing a super hot orb in a helicopter, the 7 federal employees the Department of War flagged with a phrase, "no other file got," and the 2 federal investigators who died in 1947 carrying recovered UFO fragments back to a US airbase. I closed part 1 with the pattern that hit me about halfway through. Almost every modern military file in this release came from the same drone unit, declassified by the same officer, in the same waterway the US is currently shooting at Iranians in. This is part 2. I'm going to tell you who that officer is, what the unit actually does, and what I found buried in the State Department section that nobody else is reporting. Major General Richard A. Harrison, native of Sunbury, North Carolina, enlisted in the Army in 1990, commissioned through ROTC at Elizabeth City State University in 1994 as an Air Defense Artillery officer. First duty station was Fort Bliss, Texas. He's the first ECSU graduate ever promoted to general officer in the U.S. Army. Made Brigadier General in 2021, promoted to Major General at Fort Bliss in February 2024. He commanded the 32nd Army Air and Missile Defense Command before his current role. He's now Chief of Staff at U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, the combatant command that runs every U.S. military operation across the Middle East and Central Asia. Iraq, Iran, Syria, the Arabian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, Yemen, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and 20 other countries. He's the officer who personally signed off on every modern UAP declassification in this release between October 2025 and March 2026. Every video, every mission report, every photo from a US military targeting system in the Middle East, his signature. The unit those videos came from is the 432nd Wing, based at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada. Creech is where the Air Force flies remotely piloted aircraft from. The 432nd was the first wing in Air Force history dedicated entirely to drones. They operate the MQ-9 Reaper. The Reaper is the U.S. military's primary intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform. 24/7 combat air patrols, real-time targeting. The wing has logged over 400,000 combat hours since 2007. So here's the picture. The most surveilled airspace on Earth, the CENTCOM area of responsibility, is being watched 24 hours a day by U.S. Air Force drones recording everything they see. Those drones are seeing things they cannot identify. The pilots and sensor operators document the encounters in mission reports. The reports flow up through CENTCOM. Major General Harrison signs off on declassification. The footage gets released at war.gov. The Department of War isn't releasing a random selection of historical UAP encounters. They're releasing what their own military surveillance assets recorded above an active conflict zone. Now here's the part I had to dig for, the State Department section. 7 files total, 4% of the release. Nobody in the press covered any of it. The first one is from 1963, National Aeronautics and Space Council, Executive Office of the President. July 18th, 1963, memo titled, quote, "Thoughts on the Space Alien Race Question," written by Maxwell W. Hunter, a staff member on the Space Council, addressed to Robert F. Packard at the State Department's Office of International Scientific Affairs. The memo opens, quote, "During recent discussions, the question has occasionally, though rarely, arisen that perhaps we should consider the policy question of what to do if an alien intelligence is discovered in space." Read that again. The Executive Office of the President was discussing a policy question of what to do if alien intelligence was discovered. 1963. JFK was still president when this was being drafted. The memo describes 3 categories of potential alien race the U.S. would need to negotiate with. The third category, quote, "an alien race which actually travels faster than light." Hunter's recommendation if we encountered such a race, quote, "Our policy had better be to negotiate fast. because the implications of their far better understanding and control of the fundamental forces of nature would be obvious. That document has been in State Department archives for 63 years. The Department of War released it at war.gov last week. Almost no major outlet picked it up. Then this one. State Department cable, January 27th, 1994. From the U.S. Embassy in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, to the Secretary of State. A Tajik pilot and 3 American citizens were flying a Boeing 747 at 41,000 feet over Kazakhstan. They encountered a UAP. The cable describes it as, quote, a bright light of enormous intensity, approaching from the east at great speed and higher altitude. The cable says, quote, several pictures were taken of the craft. The craft was making, quote, 90-degree turns, doing corkscrews, maneuvering in circles at great speed. A commercial Boeing 747. 3 American citizens on board. Photographs were taken. The State Department cable went directly to the Secretary of State. That cable has been classified for 32 years. It's sitting on war.gov right now. The photographs the witnesses took are in the release. The cable describing them is. So here's what I'm sitting with after a weekend of reading. A U.S. government memo from 1963 about contact policy. A State Department cable from 1994 about a Boeing 747 photographing a UAP, 82 modern military files documenting drone encounters in the most strategically sensitive airspace on Earth, all declassified by the same general officer who runs the Chief of Staff job at the same combatant command currently in active military exchange with Iran. The Department of War isn't telling the public this is alien. They're using one word, unresolved. But they are telling you the United States government has been thinking about contact protocols since the Kennedy administration, has cables in the State Department archives describing UAP photographing themselves over commercial aircraft, and has thousands of hours of military drone footage from active combat zones showing things that violate known physics. I'm not drawing a final conclusion. I don't have one. What I'm telling you is the file release isn't random. The geographic concentration isn't a coincidence. The Declassification Authority isn't a clerk. And the State Department documents go back 6 decades. If the next tranche of files matches the pattern, more CENTCOM, more drone footage, more buried diplomatic cables, that tells you the campaign has a direction. If it pivots to nuclear sites, to the Pacific Theater, to civilian aviation, that tells you something else. Either way, the Pentagon told you more files are coming every few weeks. They told you tens of millions of records are being reviewed. The agency that classified this material for almost 80 years now has a content pipeline. Watch the next release. Watch where the files come from. Watch which combatant command's officer signs off on them. Watch what the State Department section contains. The first batch traces back to 1 waterway, 1 drone unit, and 1 general officer. The Pentagon is showing you the modern surveillance state's view of something it does not understand, recorded inside the airspace where U.S. military operations are most active right now. That's what's actually in those files. That's what's actually in those files. Unresolved. The Pentagon pipeline is just beginning. Economic Ninja is out. Stay vigilant.